July 31st, 2024, the eve of fall camp at the University of Georgia, and nobody cares. Nobody outside of you fine people, of course. That's why we're here. We're here to talk about the dogs. We care. But bear with me, because the perception that I have, based on what I saw at SEC Media Days and what I've seen essentially this entire summer, is that no one cares that the top football program in college football is gearing up to try to win their third national championship in 4 seasons. On its surface, that kind of blows your mind, but if you stop and think about it for just a minute, there are reasons for that. And let's be fair, these reasons are not throwaway reasons. And it's sort of a backhanded compliment to Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. Let me explain. See, the thing I heard when I was in Dallas for SEC Media Days, more than anything else, and it was to be expected, was that Oklahoma and Texas are coming into the conference. And seeing as how the SEC, Greg Sankey, tossed those two programs a bone and held SEC Media Days in Dallas within a drive, a fairly easy drive for a lot of the media out there who are now brand new to covering the conference. Well, of course, there's going to be a lot of talk about what the Longhorns and the Sooners could or could not do this year. Can they compete? How will they fare? You know, that sort of thing. I'm sure you heard it. Fair enough. Everything was new and shiny if the burnt orange and the crimson and cream were involved when we were in Dallas. But let's take just a second and remember exactly who the Georgia Bulldogs are. When we were out there, the media knew who the Georgia Bulldogs were. They know what they expect them to be this year, and they told us all through the way that the assembled media voted while we were out there. They placed 15 Georgia Bulldogs on SEC teams, all SEC teams, preseason lists. 15. 6 on the first team. 4 offensive linemen, 4 players from Georgia's one unit, the offensive line, made all SEC preseason teams, according to the media assembled in Dallas. So they knew exactly who Georgia was. And that is part of the problem. That is part of why I thought we might ought to do this sort of show tonight. Because again, this is not some sort of position where we're like, whoa, why don't people talk about Georgia? It's more of an observation and a recognition of what Georgia is and why people might choose to talk about something else as we get ready to head into the 2024 season. Because you know and I know that if things go the way they're supposed to go, there will be plenty of conversation about Kirby Smart and his Georgia Bulldog football team this year. Some of those things we're going to get into tonight. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for the Georgia Bulldogs to be on television and be seen by a national audience. And if they handle their business, everything else will take care of itself. So no, this is not someone over here in the world of Dog Nation screaming out to the masses saying, look at us. It's not a needy position. It's simply an observation. How a program can be so good that they then warrant less conversation. It's just not sexy right now to talk about the University of Georgia and the football program. Everyone is used to the fact that they are the standard in college football right now. As much as there are a lot of schools out there that don't want to hear it, Georgia and Kirby Smart are the standard in college football today. This is not a situation where you can be standing in the forest and see the trees. You have to step back and look at the big picture and understand what they've done over their recent history and what everyone seems to expect they're going to be able to do this year to further solidify that position. We've talked about this already. 42-2 over the last 44, 3 consecutive undefeated regular seasons in the Southeastern Conference, something nobody else has done. They've won 2 out of the last 3 national championships. Last season, they had the number 1 recruiting class in the country. They've averaged the number 2.2 recruiting class over the last 5 years. Everyone is just numb to the fact that Georgia is doing it at a level right now better than anybody else. So, again, this is not Georgia saying, woe is me, look at me, screaming for attention. This is recognition of the backhanded compliment that Georgia is so good and has been so good that there are other things that are sexier right now that we want to talk about. And we're going to take a second tonight and kind of get through that. We're going to look at it. And the way I see it, there are 3 big stories that are the reason Georgia's not at the top of everyone's list for things to talk about. Shoot, even Peter Burns of SEC Network stepped right up and said, we don't need to talk about Georgia. We all know who they are, and everyone has Georgia penciled into the 12-team playoff. Now, if you really wanted to drill down on it, some people have Georgia as the number 1 seed because they think the season's going to go a certain way. Other people have Georgia as an 8 or 9 seed because they think Georgia's going to have a loss or 2 here or there, and it's going to impact their seeding. But everybody believes that Georgia's going to be in. So they would just rather not spend their time talking about that. They want to gin up the other fan bases out there to create excitement around the season. Now, that's great for them. That's not what we do. We talk Georgia football all the time. That's why we're here. But the thing I want to do for you is just, again, to offer perspective on why this might be happening. So that if you're watching anything in the mass media, if you're scrolling along through the internet, if you're bouncing around here on YouTube and you're like, why aren't I seeing more things about the Georgia Bulldogs? Well, just keep this information in the back of your mind. So what in the world am I talking about this evening? These 3 stories. There are 3. The first, of course, the Nick Saban news. Then you've got what Ryan Day is doing up at Ohio State, the situation he has sort of painted himself into with the Buckeyes this year. And then I've already mentioned the other point, the realignment point, conference realignment. The fact that whether we're talking about the new additions to the SEC or whether we're talking about what's going on in the Big Ten and how they think that somehow now they have caught up to the SEC, which I still think is a farcical argument. Conference realignment remains a topic that everyone wants to talk about. And of course, you cannot go anywhere in 2024 without still hearing the name Nick Saban and what he meant to college football and what he means to the sport now that he's out of it. Now, I say he's out of it, meaning he's still not taking the W's or the L's on Saturdays. No, but if you talk to Alabama people, they have a different perspective. He's not out of it at all. He is influencing their recruiting. He is part of the reason that DeBoer is able to work such a good recruiting class up to this point. They still have Saban there to pitch the program. And that's fine. Nothing's new there. There's nothing being hidden. He told everyone he was going to do that. But technically, he's out of the sport. But the shadow still looms. Every time he shows up on game day on Saturdays, every time someone asks an opinion about college football, they're going to seek out Nick Saban's opinion. And they should. So, will Kalen DeBoer and Alabama be able to win the way they have? Will the culture at Alabama be the same? Will Alabama be as edgy, as tough, both mentally and physically, as they have been in years past, with Nick Saban not being on the sideline and demanding that level of excellence? What does Nick Saban think about the Big Ten expansion? Again, whatever you're talking about in college football, Saban's name is in it. So that just looms over everything that's happening here in 2024. Even if you're talking about Georgia. Can Georgia now do something they couldn't do when Nick Saban was at Alabama. Will it be different? Does Kirby Smart officially dominate the league now? All through the lens, all through the haze and shadow that Nick Saban creates because of the greatness he exemplified while he was in college football. The other big story is what's going on at Ohio State. Now, there are a lot of people who, well, they just flat out don't like Ohio State. So let's start right there, right? Ohio State's good every year. They're fun to root against. So yeah, I'm going to pay attention to what they're doing because I need ammunition to be a troll on the internet. Some people look at it that way. But what I'm talking about is the fact that after taking a couple of losses to Michigan, after watching their hated rival win the national championship last year, people began to question whether or not Ryan Day's seat was hot, whether he's the guy who can get it done at Ohio State, all of these sort of things. Now, I'm not here to delve into, yes, he should be there, he should not be there, people should be angry. I'm not trying to get into any of that. But you had Ryan Day in recent years, as NIL became a thing, go out and tell all of the Ohio State people, we need you to support us. And they did. And so Ryan Day, like any good talent evaluator, someone who's trying to improve his roster, went out and got the very best players possible he could get to join his football team. Again, this is Ohio State, so love them or hate them, there's a spotlight on them. So if they lose people in the portal, that's news. If they lose out on a recruit, that's news. When they land top-notch recruits, it's news. When they sign transfer portal players, it's news. And in this offseason, Ohio State, well, they seemingly went out and bought the best team that college football can buy. They tried to fill their needs like any good roster manager would do. I'm not hating on them for how they did it. It's completely legal. If you can do it, go do it. If your team is not doing it, then that seems like a you problem that you need to take up with your team. Right? That's simply the reality right now. So this is not me saying, bad on Ohio State. I hope they lose every game. No. But what they have done is put themselves in position to where when you pay for something that you think is going to be a good product, when you have the pent-up frustration that they've been dealing with for the last few seasons, driving every decision you make, there comes a point where the rubber has to meet the road and you have to get the thing done. That's where Michigan was last year. They had been a laughing stock after what Georgia did to them in 21. They showed up in the Orange Bowl, got completely dismantled by the future national champions. And people laughed at them on a national scale for that performance. They doubted Jim Harbaugh. They doubted everything about the Michigan program. They were Big Ten good. They continued to plod along, build their offensive line, become a veteran team, and everyone knew that if they didn't win it last year, it wasn't going to happen for the Wolverines. Every Michigan fan I talked to told me as much. They knew it. And to their credit, they went out and won the national championship last season. They kind of had to. Now, the same stuff wasn't on the line. Harbaugh wasn't magically going to stay if they won it. No, it increased the odds that he was going to leave if they won it. And of course he did. They won it. He leaves. A lot of their players leave. A lot of their players graduate. This is a new Michigan team. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. That's not the point of what we're discussing tonight. But what we are discussing is that now Ohio State has watched Michigan do that. They are tired of what's going on and they want something new to happen. So Ryan Day is now in a position where it's go time. They have to go get it done. Anything less than a national championship this year is an abject failure. for the Ohio State Buckeyes. There's no two ways around that. It simply is what it is. As much as I don't like that line, that is the reality for Ohio State this season. Now, the other talking point, and I've already touched on it, is the fact that Texas and Oklahoma are in the SEC this year, and everybody has a take in some way about how this is going to impact the way the league plays out. Now, some people think that it's not going to change much. You're still going to have Alabama and Georgia at the top. Some people think Texas is going to be right there with them. Some people think Oklahoma is going to shock everybody and be in the upper third of the conference in their first year. Everybody has a take. So when I was at SEC Media Days, I was not at all surprised that people wanted to talk about Oklahoma and Texas being in the conference. But when you've got these three big stories out there, conference realignment, Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC, you've got the shadow of Nick Saban lingering over everything that happens in college football here in 2024 because he is going to remain ever present, both on a national scale as well as at Alabama. And then you've got what's happening at Ohio State. The intrinsic drama of what is going to unfold up in Columbus this year is something that even I am going to have to pay attention to. So there are plenty of big stories out there, and there are more. Like I said, conference realignment, Oregon's coming into the Big Ten. There are so many stories that when you look at Georgia and what they have done over the last few years, it is easy to be comfortable with the fact that they are really good and that maybe you don't have to pay as much attention to them as you would in another year. Now, just to recap, before Kirby Smart stepped to the podium at SEC Media Days this year, let's just set the table for just how good Georgia has been. Don't worry, we've talked about it a lot. We'll just run through it. 94-16 entering 2024 for Kirby Smart. He is 56-9 inside the conference. An SEC record, 85-15 in his first 100 games. He has 2 national titles, 2 SEC titles, 6 SEC East titles, 7 consecutive college football playoff appearances in New Year's 6 bowl games. The standard is very, very high. That's at a national level. That's what everybody knows. But if you are a Bulldog fan and you look at what Kirby's done, not only is he doing it at a national level, but along the way, he is crushing it inside the conference. Like I said, 3 consecutive seasons, undefeated regular seasons inside the Southeastern Conference, and in Georgia's traditional rivalries. Kirby Smart's teams have essentially taken the drama out of all of those. Kirby is 6-2 against Florida and has won 3 straight games in Georgia's biggest rivalry game, despite what Quinn Ewers in Texas wants to believe as they enter the league. Okay? 8-1 against Auburn. They even got revenge in 17 when Auburn got that one win over them. The Dogs went right out there and, well, handled their business. 6-1 against Georgia Tech. They've won 6 straight. 7-1 against Tennessee. They've won 7 straight. 7-1 against South Carolina, who they're not playing this year, but they've won 4 in that series. Dominance. So you can't hold it against the national media and say, you need to talk more about Georgia. Look at what they're doing. We have to understand why they're choosing to talk about these other things. We want to talk about Georgia all the time. That's why you come to places like this. That's what I want to do for you on this show. But Kirby Smart, he kind of broke college football. I mean, all he did was show up at Georgia, get settled in his first year, and then make the championship game in his second. He's dominating recruiting. Back-to-back national titles, as we've mentioned. Any way you want to look at it, Georgia is the standard right now. We know what they are. And that's why people want to talk about other things. And that's okay.
The edge comes from us. Like 42-2 does not create our edge. That does not define us. That's in the past. So we don't say, oh, we have a chip on our shoulder this year. Oh, no, we're doing exactly what we've done every year. We're going to be aggressive as hell, and we're going to come after people and attack them because we think that's the way to win football games.
Now, see, Kirby told you right there what it's about. Nothing is going to change at Athens. He doesn't care if people are watching or not. He's worried about what we're all worried about, which is this 12-team playoff. That's Georgia's goal, is to get there. And as I said earlier, most everybody has Georgia penciled in to the bracket somewhere. That's why people aren't focused on them. But Georgia doesn't need the edge from any of the success that they've done. They didn't make the playoff last year. They don't have a chip on their shoulder coming into this year. Kirby just told us that. But that is a goal that is clearly out there in front of this team, that they want to return to the playoff where they believe that they belong. So if they're going to do that, how is Kirby and staff going to do things differently here in 2024 than maybe they did in 2023?
I think every coach is looking at that, and you're trying to tweak things to say, what do I do differently? Probably for us, it's a little less aggressive camp. Couple reasons. We got a harder schedule. We're going to play more top teams, so we need depth, and we don't need guys injured. But we're going to have a longer season too. So if things go the way we want them to go, and we make the playoffs, we could be into a 3-4 game run, and you want to be at your best at the end of the year.
Now, being at his best at the end of the year is one of the things that Kirby Smart's teams have been the very best at during his time in Athens. At SEC Media Days, Nick Saban, sitting on the podium, sitting at the desk there on SEC Network, even mentioned that. He praised Kirby to his face, saying that's one of the things you have been the very best at since you've been in Athens. So there are going to be changes. You just heard from Kirby that depth is going to be a top priority for the Georgia Bulldogs here in 2024. And I talked about this a lot last week with new players that we should expect to see. We should expect to see freshmen, true freshmen, play early and often for Georgia in scenarios that actually matter. So we're going to see all this play out. It's going to be one of the things I'm going to be watching most over the course of the season, because it is going to inform us about where the team is. We're going to be able to keep our finger on the pulse of this program just by watching the games closely and understanding what they're doing to get ready for what they hope, and many of us believe, will be entrance into the college football playoff 12-team field. And that means you might have a 16, 17 game season if everything goes the way you want it to go. And let's understand here, when we were at SEC Media Days, Georgia was voted by a mile to be the favorite to win the conference in the SEC. And if you win the conference, that means you get the first round bye, you get into the 12-team playoff. But understand, it's worth looking at this schedule and remembering that this, and you've heard me say this for months, I believe now the last thing I heard is that someone not named me is looking at the schedules and pointing to Georgia's schedule, and I think I've seen them rate this schedule as high as the third toughest overall schedule for any college football team in 2024. I think I've seen them also moved all the way down to like 6 to 8. Regardless of where you put them, and this is the part I've been saying for months, Georgia has the toughest schedule as far as teams that can actually win the national championship here in 2024. From my perspective, Georgia has the toughest schedule of any contender, because not only were they put way out in front of the field at SEC Media Days, according to the assembled media of when I am in that group, but look at who else they play. They have a Clemson team that is going to be ranked to open the season. But you have Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss on this schedule, all of those games on the road. And Georgia, they finished right behind Georgia, 2-3-4 in the preseason polling of the assembled media. So the media looked at the teams in the conference and said, these 4 or 5 teams are the best, and Georgia has to play them all, and they have to do it on the road. So as excited as I want to be about this season, as amped up as I want to be about what I think Georgia can do, I look at that schedule and I'm like, yeah, that is hard. And it doesn't matter who you are. That is a hard schedule. And just one more time, just to spin it a little different way, for any Texas fans that might drop in and catch this video, and for Quinn Ewers, I just want to remind you, you may think that Texas is the biggest game on everybody's schedule. It is not. It is not. It is certainly not Georgia's biggest game on the schedule, especially not when you think about what I just said. So, the schedule's a bear, but everybody knows it. And Kirby is trying to get his team ready for what's going to be required if they're going to make the kind of run they hope to make.
Depth. You always feel good about guys that have started, right? So I don't know how many returning starters we got, but I feel good about the guys that have played in meaningful games. I need more. So our job is to find a way during these practices to create 44 guys that are ready to go and can play, and because there's going to be a long season. We're going to have injuries, and we've got to have depth.
There he is, coming right back to it. Depth. So again, I'm telling you, watch this season as it goes on. Watch closely. Don't give up if Georgia happens to be up, by a few points early in the season. Don't stop paying attention to the game. Watch it and learn about how they're managing this roster to get ready to navigate what they hope and believe will be a longer season. Carson Beck, if you're Kirby Smart and you're thinking about why they might be good this year, you're thinking about planning for that longer season. Carson Beck is a key part of that process for Kirby. He has a lot to do with why Kirby Smart feels that way. Carson Beck has a lot to do with why the assembled media and everybody else doesn't seem to want to talk about Georgia, even though Carson is the Heisman favorite headed into the season, QB1 on the best team potentially headed into the season, according to the rankings. If Georgia's not number one, I would expect that they're number two. But the feeling I got from the media in Dallas is that if the national media looks at it anyway, like the way the Dallas or the SEC media look at it, Georgia's going to be the number one team heading into the season. Now, that's not worth a hill of beans. It just tells you, again, what people think about the program. And it lets you know that at the end of the day, people expect Georgia to be right back where they have been, which is on top of the heap, competing for a national championship. But Carson Beck didn't get it done last year. It's a big reason he came back, is so he could say that he did. And when you have a guy like Carson coming back, and again, this is where we ended last year. Carson went 13-1 in his first season as a starter. He was all SEC second team last season. He led the SEC in passing yards at 3,941. I should say he's the leading returning quarterback. Jaden Daniels won the Heisman last year. His numbers were a little bit better than Carson's. But you see what I'm saying. He was a Manning Award finalist. He passed for 250 or more yards in his first 11 starts. That's an SEC record. Another SEC record is his 72.4% completion percentage. And we're not talking about dinks and dunks. This Georgia offense, which finished top 5 nationally, also led the country. Well, he's coming back as the leader in the country with the longest yards per pass play. They were throwing the ball down the field, and he finished with 24 touchdown passes. Now, those numbers could have been even better. And again, if the season goes the way people think it's going to go, they probably will be better here in 2024. But the bottom line about Carson Beck is he's going to be judged on the big moments. And Georgia is going to have plenty of them this year. Lots of big games. We've already talked about the schedule. They're going to be on television in front of a national audience time and again. It's like Coach Smart said to Bobo last year, or Coach Bobo said to Coach Smart last year. In their discussions, Kirby said, you just got to let the cat go play. And in the back half of the season, that's what we saw. From game one, that's what it has to be for Georgia here in 2024 if they're going to make it to the end and achieve all the goals that they hope to make. The bottom line is the Dogs are going to have to bring it in 24. We've talked about the schedule. Extremely difficult, but they appear to be positioned to manage it. Does that mean they're going undefeated? Of course not. But the bottom line is Georgia is the best program in the country. They have the best head coach in the country, and they have the best quarterback in the country, who is in year 2 as a starter with the same offensive coordinator. They have consistency at defensive coordinator. That group is young but talented. Georgia is in position to make a deep run into this 12-team field in the college football playoff. Now they just have to answer the bell in those big moments and get it done. We're all going to be watching. Now, you can also listen, because I want to take this opportunity to remind you that the How About That from DawgsCast is not only a YouTube live stream podcast. No, we also exist in audio form. One of our big goals this year is to try to increase listenership. So if you will, do me a favor, head on over to Apple Podcasts, find the podcast over there, follow, download, leave us a rating if you will, because we're working hard for you. We're trying to really grow on that side of things this year, and you are the key to helping us do that. It's my job to produce something worth listening to, and I hope that you'll give us the opportunity. Talking about opportunities, we continue to grind away here on YouTube, heading to 10,000. It is my great hope that we can be there by the time this college football season ends. Only with the support of people like you showing up for events like this is the way we can make that happen. I thank you all. And I think no one more than our channel members. You guys make it possible for us to do what we do here on this channel. You know that we love you, we appreciate it, and we're doing all we can for you every time. So stay hanging here with us. If you're interested in membership, you can find that information in the description below. Georgia is ready to take on the challenges here in 2024. Just don't be surprised if, as we get closer and closer to the season, you don't necessarily hear Georgia being the team that everybody wants to talk about. It's because we already know so much about who and what the Dogs are. At least we all think we do. That's why they go play the games. We're all going to find out together. But right now, heading into the season, there are other things that have people's attention a little bit more. Nick Saban is out there. Everybody's going to want his opinion about everything. Since he retired from coaching at Alabama, he has time on his hands, and he is taking advantage of that and showing up in places that maybe you haven't seen him before, but where it doesn't seem unfamiliar that you might. Wherever they're talking college football, Nick Saban is there. His shadow looms over the sport. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And if you're an Alabama fan or an SEC fan and you're watching what's happening in Alabama, don't think Nick Saban's not going to be around. He's going to be a part of every discussion that's had this season inside the conference as well. The other big story of the offseason as we move into fall camp and move into the 2024 season is Ryan Day and Ohio State. It is championship or bust for the Buckeyes this year. Don't let them tell you anything different. That is what it is. I guarantee you, they may not go undefeated. That's okay. But if they don't make the playoff, and if they don't make it to the national championship and win it, this season is going to be considered a failure in Columbus. At that point, again, I'm not here to debate whether or not Ryan Day's on the hot seat or anything like that, but you can't think that it's going to be very comfortable if that's the way it goes. Pair those two things with conference realignment, and it's easy to understand why people have things other than the University of Georgia to talk about heading into the season. And that's okay, because we've got you covered here. We're going to be talking about all the things that are going on at camp. We're going to get into the season, and we're going to have a bunch of different things to talk about as the different weeks come up and the different games come up. So lock it in, stick around with us, double check to make sure you're subscribed to the channel, turn on that notification bell, because that way you won't miss anything that we're talking about here on the How About That Dogs Cast. Until next time, I want you guys to take care of yourselves, take care of your friends, take care of your families, and go Dogs!
Told them, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.